And the test it passes is that for all its complexity and indeed its weaknesses, it's crystal clear in its central purpose and objective. It's designed to ensure that this Parliament, of which we're privileged to be members, will restore to itself the full authority to make laws which the British public are obliged to observe. And if the people don't like the laws passed by MPs, then they can remove them in a general election. That is the heart of our parliamentary system, a government accountable to the people through a directly elected House of Commons. For me, the sovereignty of Parliament is a golden principle which was severely compromised by the European Communities Act and about which we have been careless for far too long. Now, surprisingly myself, I found myself agreeing very much with Lord Beith that parliamentary sovereignty in the passage of this legislation towards our exiting is very, very important indeed, and I do indeed welcome many people who are expressing the need to see that that is involved at all stages of the process. But I have to say that it comes in some contrast to the fact that many of these people are strong supporters of the European Communities Act, which was about removing or diminishing parliamentary sovereignty in this country. So I welcome this bill, which removes legislative powers from the EU institutions where bills are passed by people over whom we have little control and who we can't remove, and brings them back to the British Parliament, democratically accountable to the British people. As they say these days, what's not to like about that? Now, of course, there are many who say, and I've heard it many times, that the bill is not restoring powers to Parliament, it's restoring powers to ministers. And there's much of that that I agree with, and there will be important discussions on Henry VIII powers and various forms of delegated legislation and the like. But what I found weak about the power grab argument is that it infers that Parliament, the House of Commons, is powerless in respect of ministers. But ministers are answerable day in, day out to MPs. Ministers' reputations, often their careers, are made and broken in Parliament. And most important of all, if the House of Commons doesn't like the way that ministers are running the country, it can defeat them all in a vote of no confidence in the government and let the people decide, as happened in 1979. I know, like many other people here, I was there. Now, the bill arrives in our House as part of a process which began with the referendum result and the 17.4 million people in a record poll who voted to leave the EU. That falls off the tongue as a glib phrase. But, my Lords, we really should reflect for a moment on the significance of that vote. The Leave votes were cast, despite advice coming from virtually everyone in authority, let's call them the great and the good, telling people to vote Remain. The Tory government, the Labour opposition, virtually all the other political parties, Liberal Democrat, SNP, Green, Welsh Nationalists, the captains of industry, the trade union leaders, the universities, the IMF, the Bank of England, and leaders of sundry countries throughout the world. Yet, despite all this warning of the perils of voting Leave, amazingly, astonishingly, the people said, thanks very much for your advice, which we usually dutifully follow, but this time, no thanks. And, my Lords, there is no polite or popular way of me saying this, but there is an elephant in the room, in this room, and it is the mismatch, the colossal mismatch between the balance of opinion here, judged by the contributions and debates over the months, and the balance of opinion outside in the country at large. Because when I go home at weekends, people are not saying to me, I made a dreadful mistake, I voted Leave. They're saying, why aren't you getting on with it? And given that the most often quoted reason for Leave voters voting the way they did was that they weren't being listened to in Parliament, let's not confirm that impression, particularly not in an unelected House, by appearing to delay or, at worst, block Brexit. And above all, let's avoid saying to 17.4 million voters, as some speeches have seemed to do, that we know what's good for them better than they know themselves. Since the referendum, of course, We've had a general election in which nearly 85% of the electorate voted for parties committed to leaving the European Union. My own party manifesto stated clearly, Labour accepts the referendum result, goes on to say we will build a close, cooperative future relationship with the EU, not as members, but as partners. The Conservative manifesto stated, following the historic referendum on the 23rd of June 2016, the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union. And parties that were most hostile to us leaving the EU, notably the Liberal Democrats, the SNP and the Greens, all lost vote share. The Liberal Democrats, who have been quite clear that they want the referendum result reversed, who voted against the implementation of the Article 50 and who called for a second referendum to cancel out the first, saw their vote share drop from 7.9% to 7.4%. Or to put it another way, the party which inaugurated its general election campaign by aiming and claiming to be the party of the 48% concluded its campaign as a party of the 7.4%. So I have to say, in conclusion, I have to say in conclusion, and I have no more time or else I'd gladly give way to my noble friend, that, my Lords, our responsibility in respect of this bill is clear. It's to examine the bill in detail, as we always do, to ensure that it's fit for purpose, and in so doing to respect the referendum which we established in this House and its result, which it is now our duty to implement.